Why would you bring your wheelchair-bound son to a place like this? The words hit like a slap across the polished air of the cafe. Every fork paused mid-air. Maya Williams froze, her gloved hands still wrapped around the push handles of her son's wheelchair. Her breath caught in her throat. But those weren't the first cruel words she'd heard today. 15 minutes earlier, Maya had pushed open the glass doors of Astoria Brunch and Brew. Her son Elijah bundled in a navy coat, his wheelchair gliding silently across the marble floor. A hostess glanced at her dark skin, at Elijah's wheelchair, and blinked like she'd just seen a storm cloud roll through a wedding. "I'm here for a reservation," Maya said gently. "Williams, for two." The owner, a stout white man with a waxed mustache and a sweater that cost someone's rent, approached. His eyes dropped to Elijah, then to the stroller-style wheelchair, and his lip curled. "A reservation?" he repeated. "Here?" "Yes," Maya answered steady. "I have a date." He chuckled, a short, sharp bark. "Sure you do." A couple at the corner table snickered. One woman whispered not quietly enough, "Probably here to ask about our leftovers." Maya's jaw locked. Elijah's little fingers tightened around hers. "We'll wait for our table," Maya said, voice calm but edged like tempered steel. The owner leaned closer, breath thick with bitterness. "We don't host charity cases, and I'm not having a circus in here. Look at him." "Stop right there," Maya snapped. "My son is not a spectacle, and you will not talk about him like that." Then a teenager near the pastry case snorted. "Wheelchair at a brunch spot? That's wild." He mimed, pushing invisible wheels, and laughed. Maya stepped in front of Elijah. "Say one more thing," she warned, voice low, trembling with fury, "and I'll—" "Get out," the owner said sharply, lifting a cup of steaming coffee. "Or I'll make sure you do." She lifted her chin. "We're not leaving. I have a reservation and my son deserves to sit down like anyone else." "You think that chair belongs here? That you belong here?" he hissed. She took a measured breath and leaned forward, whispering back, "My son belongs anywhere I bring him." The owner's face twisted. In one sudden, animal motion, he tossed the cup forward. Scalding coffee splashed toward Elijah. Maya moved faster than instinct, faster than thought. She threw her arm across her son, shielding him. Pain seared through her skin like fire-licking bone. Elijah screamed. A collective gasp erupted. "You monster!" she cried, clutching her burning arm, eyes blazing tears of rage and pain. She knelt beside Elijah, trembling, smoothing his curls with her unburned hand. "Baby, it's okay. It's okay. Mama's here." He sobbed. "Mama, it hurt." "I know, sweetheart. I know." Her arm throbbed viciously, skin already turning angry red. She pressed her lips together, swallowing the scream building inside. Elijah was safe. She could take pain. She'd been taking it her whole life. Just then, the cafe door chimed, and then he spoke. "Why would you bring your wheelchair-bound son to a place like this?" She turned slowly, her gaze landing on the tall, broad-shouldered man who had just walked in from the wintry Manhattan sidewalk. Snowflakes still clung to the lapels of his navy wool coat. His silver-streaked hair was tousled, his cheeks flushed from the cold, and yet, his eyes ice blue, sharp, were locked on her with something between curiosity and disbelief. For a heartbeat, Maya didn't recognize him. Then it hit her. Julian Reed. He was late 23 minutes, to be exact, and now this? She straightened, brushing invisible dust from the front of her thrifted wool coat. Her voice, though calm, carried steel beneath its surface. Maya spun toward him, face pale from shock and burns. "Excuse me?" The man blinked then. To her utter disbelief, laughed softly. Not cruelly. More like someone who had just witnessed a surreal scene and couldn't believe he had walked into the middle of it. He lifted both hands as if surrendering. "Stop, please. Let me explain before you hit me with your handbag." He took a breath. "If I had known you were bringing your son, I would have brought my daughter. She used a wheelchair for almost a year." Maya blinked. The room wobbled. He stepped closer carefully. "I'm Julian. You must be Maya. Our mutual friend said you were strong." She forgot to add legendary. Maya blinked. "Friend. Blind date." That's right, her friend had set this up. She was still in a date, even in this nightmare. He looked from her burned arm to Elijah's trembling lip, and the air around him changed. His posture stiffened not in anger at her, but at the situation around them. "You," he said to the cafe owner, voice dropping into something dangerous. "You poured hot coffee on a child?" The owner sputtered, suddenly pale. She was... Julian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Apologize." Caesar, this woman." Julian turned, eyes like winter storm glass. "Apologize. To her, and to the boy. Now." The cafe held its breath. The owner swallowed hard. I'm sorry." "To them," Julian pressed, cold as ice. He looked at Elijah. "I'm sorry, son." Elijah sniffled, still scared but listening. "Mama, can we go?" "Fine," she murmured. As they walked out together, whispers rose. "Who is he?" He made the owner apologize. "He must be someone." But Maya didn't look back. She had her son in her arms, fire in her blood, and for the first time in a long time something that felt like possibility walking beside her. Respect. And though she didn't know it yet, this snowy Manhattan morning had not just bruised her spirit, it had cracked open a door that had been shut for years. A door to a new life neither she nor the man called Julian Reed saw coming. If this story moved you, hit like and tell us where you're watching from. You might be closer to another listener than you think. The car ride to Riverside Inclusion Park was quiet, but not heavy. Julian sat in the front, occasionally glancing at Maya in the rearview mirror. She sat beside Elijah, cradling his head gently on her unburned arm. A cold bottle of water, courtesy of Julian's emergency stash, was pressed against her forearm, wrapped in a clean cloth from the glove box. The burn still stung, but Maya was grateful it hadn't blistered yet. The real pain was how quickly things had spiraled. Again, her heart was still racing, though the silence around them felt like a shield. She wasn't used to someone stepping in for her, especially not someone who looked like Julian. Elijah had fallen asleep, his small frame curled under a thick navy blanket Julian had wordlessly handed back. He looked peaceful now. Not like the frightened child from 30 minutes earlier. Maya leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes for just a moment, letting herself breathe. "You're brave," Julian said softly, breaking the silence. She didn't open her eyes. "I'm tired." Those aren't mutually exclusive. She let that settle. When they reached the park, Julian helped her unbuckle Elijah. The sun had begun to push through the gray clouds, casting a soft winter glow across the open space. Riverside Inclusion Park stretched out before them, tucked just off the Hudson, built for families like hers, like his. Wide, smooth paths, cut through colorful sports courts. Adaptive swings and musical installations played gentle notes as the breeze touched them. Children moved freely on wheels, with braces, walkers, or unassisted. No one stared. No one whispered. It felt like a different world. Julian knelt beside Elijah as Maya adjusted his coat. "Hey, buddy," he said quietly. "You awake?" Elijah blinked, then nodded. "Is this the special place?" Julian smiled. "It is. Want to meet some cool kids? Will they make fun of my chair?" Julian shook his head. "Not here. Here, everyone's got their own kind of awesome." Maya felt the corners of her mouth twitch. She hadn't smiled all day, but this moment tugged at her. They rolled Elijah along the path toward the basketball court. A young girl, about 6, with wild brown curls flying under a purple knit cap, was shooting hoops from a bright blue wheelchair. "Grace," Julian called. The girl turned, her eyes lighting up. "Dad!" She wheeled toward them with practiced speed, then stopped short, examining Maya and Elijah with bold curiosity. "Is this them?" she asked. Julian nodded. "Grace, meet Maya and Elijah." Grace offered a hand to Elijah. "I like your wheels. They're way cooler than the ones I had." "No." Elijah hesitated, then smiled shyly and shook her hand. "Yours are blue. Yours have flame stickers. Those came with it," he said, then added, "But I like them." "Good," Grace replied. "You want to shoot hoops? I'll let you use the green ball." Maya watched as Elijah was suddenly pulled into Grace's orbit, wheeling off toward the court while she explained the rules of wheelchair basketball in rapid, confident bursts. "You weren't joking," Maya murmured. "She's a force of nature." "Meow," Julian chuckled. "She gets that from her mom." Maya glanced at him. His expression softened as he watched his daughter. She passed? He shook his head. No, she just didn't stay. Maya didn't ask more. She recognized the kind of pain that didn't need words to be understood. They walked toward a bench under a maple tree, its leaves long fallen. Julian let her sit first. She noticed how he stood slightly sideways, giving her space, but attention. I don't usually bring my son to first dates, she said. I don't usually insult mine within 30 seconds of arrival. That earned a breath of a laugh. Seriously, though, she added, I would have canceled if the sitter hadn't bailed last minute. Then I'm glad she did. Maya arched a brow. You're glad you walked in on me nearly tackling a racist cafe owner? I'm glad I saw who you are before you had the chance to hide it. She looked away, unsure how to respond. Can I ask you something? He said. She nodded slowly. When that man threw the coffee, you didn't flinch. You didn't back down. You just shielded him. He looked toward the court where Elijah and Grace were laughing. Where does that strength come from? Maya was quiet a long moment. From being overlooked, from being told to wait my turn, from growing up in a world that assumes the worst of women like me and even worse of little boys like him. Her voice wasn't angry, just honest. You either grow stronger, or you disappear. Julian nodded, solemn. And today, you saw a glimpse of how often we're expected to disappear. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. That, in itself, was rare. After a while, she asked, why this place? Why fund it? My daughter, he said. After her surgery, I couldn't find a single place that didn't treat her like broken porcelain. And I'm not rich in guilt. I'm just rich. So I used it. She turned to him, surprised by the clarity. I wanted her to grow up somewhere she wasn't stared at, pitied, or excluded. I wanted her to believe the world would adjust to her, not the other way around. Maya watched him now, fully. No show, no script. Just a man who had seen pain, too. I thought you'd be slicker, she said, polished. The kind of guy who drinks $8 coffee and forgets people's names. I do drink $8 coffee, Julian confessed. But I remember names, especially ones that come with fire in their eyes and courage in their spine. Elijah wheeled back toward them just then, cheeks flushed. Mama, Grace says I'm fast. She says I should race other kids. Maya smiled, something inside her loosening. Can I? He asked breathlessly. She looked at Julian. Only if we can watch, Julian grinned. As Elijah spun back toward the track, Maya whispered, You don't seem surprised. Julian shrugged. He's your son. Of course he's fast. She laughed softly, then without thinking added, Thank you, for today. He glanced sideways at her. Don't thank me yet. The tacos here are terrible. She smirked. So I've been tricked. No, you've been invited. She turned her head, letting the moment settle. Maybe this wasn't a date anymore. Maybe it was the beginning of something more profound. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. And maybe healing. The taco stand was exactly where Julian had promised, tucked beneath a red and yellow awning at the far end of the park, near the jazz trio playing a mellow rendition of Autumn Leaves. The smell of grilled corn, lime, and slow-cooked meat hung heavy in the air. Maya stood in line with Elijah beside her, the blanket Julian had given them earlier draped across the handles of his wheelchair like a cape. He was still beaming, cheeks pink from the cold and excitement. Grace had already darted ahead, holding 2 empty paper trays like they were trophies. Julian lingered behind, talking to someone Maya didn't recognize, an older woman in a red windbreaker and a navy blue ball cap with the words "Inclusion is a right, not a privilege" stitched in yellow. From the angle of their conversation and the way the woman kept pointing toward Grace and Elijah, Maya guessed she was one of the program organizers, maybe even the coach Julian had mentioned. Maya's eyes returned to her son. She watched as Elijah tapped his fingers rhythmically on the armrest of his wheelchair. A little beat he made up when he was nervous, or excited, or both. She knelt beside him, gently brushing hair from his forehead. You doing okay, baby? He nodded. I like Grace. She talks a lot, but she knows stuff, like about planets. She said Jupiter's the biggest one, but Saturn's got cooler rings. Maya smiled. She sounds like a good friend. No, Elijah looked at her seriously. Can we come back here, Mama? Again? Maybe next week? She blinked, caught off guard by how quickly he'd latched onto this place, this moment. I think that could be arranged. Just then, Julian joined them, holding 2 hot cups of cider and 2 water bottles tucked under his arm. Tacos take a while, he said, but cider's instant. And extremely underrated. Maya took the cup he offered. The warmth seeped into her palms, easing the throb in her arm. She noticed he hadn't asked about her burn since the car ride, but he also hadn't stopped watching it. It made her feel seen, not scrutinized. Did you talk to the coach? She asked. Julian nodded. Coach Barnes. She said if Elijah wants, he can join their Saturday rec league. No cost. Maya raised an eyebrow. No cost? I cover it, he said simply. Kids who want to move should never be limited by money. She stared at him for a long moment. You really believe that, don't you? He met her eyes. I do. I've seen what happens when kids are told their mobility is a burden. I've also seen what happens when they're told it's a strength. Elijah chimed in. Mama, Grace says she used to play soccer in a chair, like real soccer. She did, Julian said. They had foam goals and bumpers on the chairs. She knocked down 2 coaches by accident. She said it wasn't an accident, Elijah added, grinning. Julian laughed. That sounds like her. They sat together on a bench under a string of hanging lights, sipping cider and waiting for the tacos. Grace returned with one of the volunteers, balancing a tray of food like a server in training. She placed it on the bench proudly. I got us 3 carne asada and 1 chicken, because chicken is boring, she announced. Grace, Julian warned, tone amused. What? I'm just saying facts. Elijah giggled. I like chicken. Grace considered this. Okay, chicken's acceptable if it's for people under 7. Julian exchanged a look with Maya. See what I live with? Maya smiled despite herself. It's like living with a TED Talk in sneakers. They ate as the sun dipped low, casting the park in amber tones. Other families clustered in circles, some in lawn chairs, others sitting on blankets. A child wheeled by with a balloon tied to the back of their chair that read Zoom Zoom. Maya looked around, breathing in the stillness that came not from silence but from belonging. She hadn't felt this kind of peace since before the accident. As she wiped taco sauce from Elijah's cheek, he looked up at Julian. Do you think I can be fast like Grace? Julian knelt beside him, adjusting the strap on the side of his chair. I don't think, buddy. I know. Elijah's eyes sparkled. Even if I can't walk? Julian pointed to his heart. The fastest things in the world, they don't walk, they burn. Elijah blinked. Like rockets? Exactly. Grace nodded approvingly. He gives good metaphors. It's annoying. The moment hung there, suspended between fire and quiet. Later, as they were packing up to leave, Maya noticed Julian gently adjusting the footrests on Elijah's chair, as if it were second nature. You've done that before, she said quietly. Grace had the same model, he replied. Some things you don't forget. No. Elijah was dozing by the time they reached the car. Grace had already invited him to bring his coolest space facts next Saturday, and promised to lend him a book about Mars. Maya buckled her son in carefully, then turned to find Julian standing a few feet away, watching her. Today could have gone differently, she said. Very differently. I know. I was ready to walk out. I saw. Why didn't you let me? He paused, looking up at the stars just beginning to prick the sky. Because I've walked out before, he said, and I remember wishing someone had asked me to stay. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she leaned against the open car door, letting that truth settle between them. Finally, she said, this isn't a normal first date. Julian smiled. Would have been a disaster if it was. Maya tilted her head. You mean it wasn't already? He laughed. You saved your son from a boiling cup of coffee, and I put a cafe owner in his place. Honestly, it was kind of epic. She couldn't help it, she laughed. For real this time. It surprised her. It surprised them both. Next week, Julian said softly. Same time? Maya nodded. Same park. Same tacos? She rolled her eyes. Maybe. He held her gaze for one moment longer, then opened the car door for her. Drive safe, Maya. She slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and looked at him one last time. Thanks, Julian. For what? For showing up. No. He tapped the roof gently, then stepped back as she pulled away. In the rearview mirror, she saw him wave. He stood in the amber glow of the park lights, hands in his pockets. No entourage, no name tag, no title. Just a man, and for the first time in a very long time, Maya didn't feel like she was leaving alone. Saturday morning arrived with a chill in the air and quiet nerves in Maya's chest. She stood in front of the mirror, tugging down the sleeves of a soft gray sweater that barely concealed the fading burn on her forearm. It had scabbed slightly, tender but healing. She didn't want Elijah to see it anymore. He'd asked twice during the week if she was still hurting, and each time she lied easily. No, baby. Mama's fine. But the truth was more complicated. The burn was the smallest wound she carried. Since the incident at Astoria Brunch and Brew, the days had unfolded with a strange mixture of weight and lightness. Elijah hadn't stopped talking about Grace or the basketball league. He'd drawn a picture of her on Wednesday and declared it his friendship art, taping it to the refrigerator like it was a certificate. Maya, on the other hand, hadn't stopped thinking about Julian. Not in the romantic sense, at least not entirely, but in the way one thinks about an unexpected storm. He had come out of nowhere, loud, messy, impossible to ignore. But instead of destruction, he'd brought shelter, strength, respect. She pulled her hair into a loose braid, dabbed gloss on her lips, and glanced at the time. 10:40. 2 a.m. The park meetup was at 11. Elijah was already ready, fidgeting by the front door in his red puffer jacket, holding a book about the solar system under one arm and a banana muffin in the other. Grace said Saturn has 62 moons, he reminded her. But she's wrong. It's 83. They found more. Maya smiled, grabbed her purse, and opened the door. Well, I guess you're going to settle the science debate once and for all. He grinned. I'm gonna blow her mind. They drove in light traffic, music low, Elijah humming along. Maya found herself checking the mirror more than usual, adjusting her earrings, smoothing her coat. When they pulled into the parking lot at Riverside Inclusion Park, she saw him. Julian. He was already there, leaning against a tree near the registration booth, wearing dark jeans, boots, and a long camel coat. One hand held a to-go cup, the other tucked into his pocket. He looked comfortable, present, grounded. Elijah spotted him first. There's Mr. Julian. Julian looked up and smiled as they approached. Hey, Rocket Man, he greeted Elijah. I hear you've got a galactic argument to win today. I brought evidence, Elijah said, proudly holding up his book. Julian chuckled and looked at Maya. And how's your arm? She hesitated. Better. He didn't press, just nodded. You came. I said I would. Grace ran up then, practically bouncing on her wheels. Elijah, I told Coach Barnes you're fast. She's gonna time you today. I've been practicing at home, Elijah said with an adorably serious tone. As the kids sped off, Maya and Julian walked behind them slowly. Around them, the park buzzed with laughter, encouragement, the thud of basketballs and the hiss of wheels over pavement. The world felt good here. But as they reached the benches by the track, Maya spotted a familiar figure sitting at the far end. A man, mid-50s, clean-cut, white, wearing a dark blazer and loafers that didn't quite match the park vibe. Her body tensed instantly. Julian noticed. You okay? She didn't answer. The man stood, straightened his jacket, and started walking toward them. Maya's hand clenched. She stepped slightly in front of Julian, her entire body tightening as instinct kicked in. The man stopped a few feet away. Maya, he said. Her voice was flat. What are you doing here? Julian glanced between them, immediately alert but silent. I didn't know where else to go, the man said. I've been trying to reach you for months. You lost the right to reach me when you walked away. Dan. Julian's brow furrowed, then realization flickered in his eyes. This man wasn't just someone from the past. He was Elijah's father. Maya's voice dropped, calm but lethal. You don't get to show up now. Not here. Not where he feels safe. I just wanted to see him, the man said. I made mistakes. I'm trying to fix them. Julian stepped forward slightly, not aggressive but firm. Maybe this isn't the place. The man looked him over. And you are? Julian didn't respond. He didn't have to. His silence said protector. The man tried again. Maya, please. 5 minutes. Maya took a long breath. Her eyes flicked to Elijah, now laughing with Grace near the swings. She looked back at the man who once promised to stay and vanished when Elijah was diagnosed. You had your chance, she said. He's not your story to rewrite. Then she turned her back on him. Julian followed without a word. They sat on a nearby bench as the man slowly walked away, shoulders slumping. After a moment, Maya exhaled, voice quieter than before. He left the day Elijah's neurologist said the word autism, disappeared, sent one email 2 months later, never showed up in person. Until now. Julian's jaw tightened. You don't owe him anything. She didn't respond. Instead, she watched Elijah, her whole world in a red jacket and a crooked smile. Julian finally said, You handled that with more grace than most. No, she said, shaking her head. I handled it because I've had to. My son deserved a life without wondering why his father only wanted the easy parts. They sat in silence a moment longer, only the sounds of children playing filling the space. Then Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You said this wasn't a normal first date, he said. You were right. Maya turned toward him. But I'm not here for something normal. She looked at him, unsure of what to say, not because she doubted him, but because part of her, for the first time in years, wanted to believe him. The week that followed unfolded with a curious rhythm, quiet mornings, routine evenings, and moments in between where Maya found herself looking out the window longer than necessary, wondering why Julian's words kept circling in her mind like a low hum. But I'm not here for something normal. She hadn't called him. He hadn't called her either. But somehow, that felt okay. There was a mutual understanding in the silence. One born not from avoidance, but from respect. From giving space after a heavy moment. Elijah had brought Grace's name into nearly every dinner conversation since Saturday. He wanted to learn how to spin his chair, like she did, had asked if he could get gloves like hers, and even tried rolling backward across the living room before bumping into the couch and laughing hysterically. Every time Maya looked at him like that light in his eyes, future in his voice, she was reminded of just how fragile and precious these stretches of peace were. How close they'd come to losing them. It was Thursday afternoon when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated, thumb hovering over decline, but something in her gut said answer. Hello? Miss Williams? A woman's voice, measured, polished. I'm calling from the Whitaker Foundation. Mr. Julian Reed asked if you'd be available this Saturday for a private reception he's hosting at the Riverside Community Pavilion. Maya blinked. I'm sorry, did you say Julian Reed? Yes, ma'am. He said to assure you that Elijah is also welcome, and that this is not, how did he phrase it? A bougie charity thing, the woman chuckled. He said you'd understand. Maya felt her lips tug upward in spite of herself. Yes, we'll be there. She hung up and stared at the wall for a moment. Julian Reed, of course that was his last name. She'd never asked, hadn't needed to. But Whitaker Foundation? That was a name she did recognize. It appeared on donation plaques in pediatric wings and on grant letters for adaptive learning tools. Elijah's school even had a sensory room funded by the Whitaker Foundation. Maya sat slowly on the couch, heart thumping. She replayed everything about him, his calm, his decisiveness, the way people had moved around him, deferential but not fearful. How he'd made that cafe owner apologize without raising his voice. She reached for her phone and typed, Julian Reed Whitaker Foundation. The search engine didn't even finish before suggesting, Julian Reed net worth, Julian Reed daughter Grace, Julian Reed billionaire philanthropist. She stared at the words, not because they shocked her, but because, in hindsight, they made too much sense. And yet, he never mentioned it, never used it, never leveraged it. He showed up in boots and a coat with coffee and quiet strength and let her speak, let her protect her son. Let her define the moment without drowning her in resources or pity. She scrolled through a few images, one of him standing beside a mayor, another shaking hands with veterans at a housing initiative, another more casual walking beside Grace at a sports event. No spotlight, just presence. Maya locked her phone and sat back, sighing. Saturday was going to be something. The pavilion stood just beside the edge of the park, strung with lights, soft jazz playing in the background. It was warm inside despite the late autumn chill, and the room had the quiet buzz of people who cared deeply but didn't need to prove it. Maya wore a long navy dress with a gray shawl draped over her shoulders. She'd let Elijah pick her earrings' small gold hoops, and he'd insisted on matching them with his bow tie. Julian saw them the moment they walked in. He didn't rush. He didn't call out. He simply crossed the room slowly and smiled like they'd arrived exactly when he hoped they would. "You came," he said softly. "You invited," she answered. Julian knelt beside Elijah. "Nice bow tie." Elijah grinned. "Mama said I look sharp." "She's right," Julian said. "You look like a gentleman spy." "Do gentlemen spies get muffins?" "They get two." Elijah took off toward the snack table. Grace waved from across the room, already holding a plate for him. Julian straightened, looking at Maya. "You found out." She didn't pretend. "About the foundation?" "Yes." He nodded once, like he'd expected it. "You kept it quiet," she said. "I needed you to know me before you Googled me. And if I hadn't come tonight, I'd still be hoping," he said. "But I wouldn't chase, not after everything you've carried." She watched him for a long moment. "Why me, Julian?" He didn't hesitate. "Because when everyone else saw a woman struggling, I saw a woman standing her ground. You didn't beg. You didn't break. You bled and still stood taller than anyone in that room." Maya swallowed the knot rising in her throat. "And Elijah?" she asked. He smiled softly. "He's got more fire in him than most adults I know, and more grace, too." She exhaled. "This still doesn't feel like a normal anything." He chuckled. "We already covered that." "No." She looked around the room, families of all types, kids laughing. A couple of teachers from Elijah's school mingling near the cider station. It wasn't a gala. It wasn't a charity event. It was a gathering of people who belonged, just like the park. And for the first time, Maya realized Julian wasn't offering her anything. He was inviting her into something he'd already built with thought, with heart, and without expecting anything in return. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You didn't need to impress me." "I wasn't trying to," he said. "I was trying to show you that some men don't leave." That hit harder than he probably realized. She took a breath, let the words settle, and then gave him something in return, something quiet but real. "I'm not ready for everything," she admitted, "but I'm not afraid anymore." Julian's voice was gentle. Then, "Let's start with something." He reached for her hand not to hold it, but to steady it. And for the first time in years, she didn't pull away. Sunday morning broke soft and gold through Maya's bedroom window. The air outside was brisk, October wrapping its arms around the city, reminding everyone that change was inevitable. But inside, the warmth of fresh sunlight across her sheets, the distant smell of pancakes, and the soft hum of Elijah's cartoons in the living room gave the apartment a rare calm. Maya sat at the kitchen table, elbows resting on her copy of the New York Times that she hadn't actually read. She was staring past the pages, back at last night. She had said it. "I'm not ready for everything, but I'm not afraid anymore." It was the closest she'd come to opening the door to letting someone in without a checklist, without building escape routes in her mind. And Julian, he hadn't asked for more. Just sat with it. Quietly. Steadily, like someone who knew not to rush a sunrise. "More syrup, please," Elijah's voice called from the couch. "In a minute, baby," she replied, grabbing the bottle from the counter. The moment her hand touched it, her phone vibrated. "Julian." A message. "Julian, good morning. Just checking no muffin overdose, I hope." Maya smiled, thumbs moving quickly. "Maya." He crashed at 8:07 p.m. sugar coma. Minimal damage. A few seconds passed. "Julian." Relieved. "Also about yesterday." She waited, pulse steady but curious. Julian continued. "There's a place I go on Sundays. Quiet. No fanfare. Would you and Elijah want to join?" She stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed, "Where?" Within seconds, "Julian, Harlem, 141st, and Frederick Douglass. Noon. I'll explain when you get there. No assumptions, no pressure, just an offer." She turned toward the living room. "Elijah," she called, "want to go somewhere with Mr. Julian today?" His head popped up over the couch, hair wild. "Will Grace be there?" "Don't think so. Just us." He thought for a second. "Will there be snacks?" She grinned. Probably. Then yes. The place was small, humble, a community center, tucked between two brick buildings with worn murals and rust-stained awnings. But inside, warmth, laughter, and the low clatter of pots and pans created a kind of quiet sanctuary. Maya pushed the door open and stepped into a room that smelled like rosemary, sage, and cornbread. Julian was already there, not standing in a corner or waiting for them at a table, but bent over a folding tray near the kitchen, helping a young boy stack plastic bowls into neat rows. He was wearing a dark flannel shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, and sneakers. Not a billionaire, not a CEO, just a man. He looked up, smiled. "You came. You didn't say this was a soup kitchen," she said, scanning the room. Families lined up near serving trays. A volunteer handed out hand-knitted scarves by the door. An elderly woman in a wheelchair hummed softly to herself by the window. It wasn't charity. It was community. Julian approached them with a soft nod to Elijah. "Hey, Rocket Man." "Hi," Elijah grinned. "What are you doing?" "Serving Sunday lunch," Julian said. "We make it together. Everybody eats. Nobody leaves hungry." He turned to Maya. "I've been coming here since Grace was in preschool." Her idea. Actually. She wanted to know why some kids didn't get hot lunch on weekends. Maya looked around again. "And they let you help?" Julian smiled. "Eventually, they stepped into the kitchen together. Maya washed her hands, tied an apron around her waist, and stood beside him as he ladled soup into bowls with practiced ease. For the next hour, they worked without much conversation. It wasn't needed. The rhythm was steady. Hands moved. Smiles exchanged. Elijah read quietly at a table nearby, occasionally waving at Julian when he caught him looking. When the rush passed and the trays emptied, Julian handed Maya a glass of water and led her outside to the small garden behind the building. The late autumn sun filtered through dried vines and sagging tomato cages. A bench sat under a crooked tree, half shaded. "They Saturday. This," Maya said, "is not what I expected." "No." Julian looked at her sideways. "Disappointed? Surprised? Better or worse?" She didn't answer right away. "I thought you'd be flashier," she said. "Limousines, wine lists, hand-stitched seats." He chuckled. "I have all those things, but they don't make me feel like this does." She glanced over. "You ever get tired of being generous?" He looked at his hands. "You know what I get tired of? People thinking generosity is loud, that it has to be performative, that it needs applause. Real generosity isn't about being seen, it's about seeing." Maya was quiet a long moment. Then softly, "You saw me in that cafe. I saw a woman get burned protecting her son." "No," she said. "You saw me before that. When I was just trying to sit down. You watched." "I did." "Why?" "Because the room changed when you walked in. Not because of how people reacted, but because you didn't shrink. You didn't apologize for existing." Maya swallowed, unsure how to respond. Then Julian leaned back, stretching his legs. "Can I tell you something?" he asked. She nodded. "When Grace's mom left, I thought I'd done something to deserve it. I kept going over every fight, every word, every second. But then I realized some people don't know how to stay when life gets hard." Maya nodded slowly. "I know that story." He looked at her gently. "I think we both carry ghosts." She took a deep breath. "The question is, can ghosts sit beside us without running the room?" Julian smiled faintly. "Only if we stop feeding them." A small laugh escaped her throat. They sat in silence for a while, the kind that doesn't press, doesn't ask anything more than presence. When Elijah came out into the garden, holding the last muffin in a paper napkin, Maya stood. "Ready to go, baby?" He nodded, then turned to Julian. "Do you come here every Sunday?" "Pretty much," Julian said. "Then we'll come back." Maya raised a brow. "We will?" Elijah shrugged. "They got good muffins." Julian grinned. High praise. As they walked back through the kitchen and toward the front door, Maya caught Julian's arm gently. "You know what this is, don't you?" she asked. He tilted his head. "What?" "This. All of this. You're not just showing me your world. You're asking if I'll stand in it." Julian didn't answer. He just opened the door and held it wide. Wednesday evening came with the scent of rain. It wasn't falling yet, but the air was heavy, thick with that earthy stillness that New Yorkers knew well, the calm before the sky cracked open. Maya stood at her kitchen counter, stirring spaghetti in a chipped ceramic pot, while Elijah arranged two place settings at their small table. His tongue peeked out the side of his mouth in concentration as he carefully laid out napkins, silverware, and one blue plastic cup. "Do you think Mr. Julian likes tomato sauce?" Elijah asked suddenly. Maya turned from the stove, eyebrows raised. "Why?" "Because if he does," Elijah said matter-of-factly, "we should invite him to dinner. This is the sauce you made when I had the flu and you said it had healing powers." Maya smiled, turning the burner down. "That was mostly garlic and desperation, sweetheart." He shrugged. "Still tasted like a spell." She laughed, but her mind lingered on the idea longer than she expected. Invite Julian over? There were unspoken rules to a life like hers. You could go on dates. You could show up to parks. You could even visit soup kitchens on weekends. But inviting someone into your home, into your real, lived-in space with crayon drawings on the fridge and one mismatched chair from Goodwill that was different. That was vulnerability. The buzzer rang just as she finished plating the spaghetti. Elijah jumped. Maybe it's him. She froze. Her heart stuttered. No, she hadn't told Julian their address. She walked over, pressed the intercom button. "Yes?" A woman's voice responded, polite but clipped. "Maya Williams?" "Yes?" "This is Lydia from the Office of Special Education Programs. I'm here about Elijah." Maya's chest tightened. "Can you hold, please?" She opened the front door to find a woman in a sleek trench coat, holding a tablet and clipboard. Her badge glinted in the hallway light. "I apologize for the unannounced visit," Lydia said, stepping inside with brisk efficiency. "We attempted to reach you by mail. There's been a reevaluation of your son's IEP, his individualized education plan." Maya motioned toward the couch, trying to still her racing thoughts. "What kind of reevaluation?" Lydia sat, already scrolling through her tablet. There was a flag on his record after an incident logged by a former teacher 3 years ago. It seems someone submitted a request for a placement review. Usually these are routine, but in this case, Maya's voice sharpened. "In this case, what?" "The board is considering whether Elijah would be better served in a more structured facility, a specialized residential program." The air vanished from the room. "No." Maya said it without hesitation. Lydia continued, unfazed. "These recommendations are never made lightly. We understand the burden placed on single parents, especially in communities with limited support and—" "No." Maya's voice was louder now. "My son is not going into a facility." Lydia blinked. "You can appeal. I will burn your appeal process to the ground." Elijah appeared in the doorway, clutching his blue cup. "Mama?" Maya softened instantly. "Go finish your drawing, baby." He hesitated, sensing tension, then nodded and slipped away. When she turned back, Lydia was standing, tablet hugged to her chest. "I understand your frustration," she said, "but these discussions will continue whether you're involved or not. I suggest you stay ahead of them." She left without waiting for a response. Maya stood in the silence afterward, barely noticing the tears that had begun to fall. Her knees felt weak. Her whole body trembled not from fear, but fury. They wanted to take her baby. Again, not physically, not yet, but systemically, quietly, bureaucratically, with ink and paper and cold smiles. She moved on instinct, grabbed her phone, scrolled to Julian's name. Her thumb hovered, and then she tapped. Julian answered on the second ring. "Maya?" She exhaled. "They want to reclassify Elijah." He didn't need more. "I'm coming," he said. 10 minutes later, he knocked. When she opened the door, she looked smaller than usual. Not fragile, but tired. She didn't say anything, just stepped aside so he could enter. Julian looked around. The apartment was modest, but full of warmth. Drawings taped to the walls. A shelf of kids' books beside the TV. A worn recliner beside the window with a blanket draped over the side like a memory. He turned to her. "Tell me everything." She sat on the edge of the couch, explained the visit, the old record, the facility mention. Her hands shook once, then steadied. Julian didn't interrupt. He listened. When she finished, She looked at him, eyes wide and pained. What if they win? They won't, he said simply. You don't know that. I do, he replied, voice steel. Because now it's not just you. It's me. And I have more lawyers than they have pens. A dry laugh escaped her lips. Not the time for jokes, she said. It wasn't a joke. They sat in silence. Then she said, I'm tired, Julian. I'm so tired of fighting. Every week, there's a new system, a new form, a new insult wrapped in polite language. And now this? He nodded slowly. I know. And I can't erase that pain. But I can carry some of it. If you'll let me. She looked at him. For a long, long time. Then she whispered, Stay for dinner? His smile was gentle. I'd be honored. She rose and moved to the kitchen. Julian watched her stir the now cold spaghetti. Watched the way she moved like someone who had carried the world alone for far too long and didn't know how to set it down. And in that quiet, something settled between them. Not love, not yet, but something close. A beginning. Julian stayed, not just for dinner but for the dishes too. He rolled up his sleeves and rinsed Elijah's blue plastic cup with the same attention he gave to the glass bowls. Maya watched him, arms crossed, leaning against the doorway between the kitchen and living room. Her world had been chaos for years, doctors, IEPs, judgmental stares, empty chairs at parent-teacher meetings. No man had ever stayed long enough to learn the sound of her son's laugh, let alone help with the dishes. But here he was, humming softly under his breath, elbows deep in soap suds like it was the most natural thing in the world. When Julian finished, he dried his hands and looked up at her. You okay? He asked gently. She nodded, but he didn't buy it. I don't mean just now, he said. I mean, really. Maya exhaled, a soft, tired breath that had been waiting all day to leave her lungs. No, she admitted. I'm not. Julian stepped forward, slowly, giving her room to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Good, he said. That caught her off guard. Good? He smiled softly. It's good to be honest. You've been fine for too long. She laughed dry, but real. A woman like me doesn't get the luxury of not being fine. A woman like you deserves peace more than most. They stood there in that small kitchen, the hum of the fridge the only sound between them. Maya broke the silence. They're going after him because he doesn't fit. Because he makes teachers uncomfortable. Because he makes noise. Because he stims with his fingers and forgets eye contact. They're going after him, Julian said, voice like steel, because they think you don't have power, and they're about to find out you do. She looked up at him, something unreadable in her eyes. And you'll just step in? Just like that? No, he said, not just like that, because I want something in return. Her eyes narrowed. What? Trust. She stared at him. Hard. That's expensive, she said. I know. And non-refundable. He nodded. She didn't say yes. But she didn't say no either. In the next room, Elijah laughed at something on TV, some cartoon joke only a child could truly understand. Maya turned toward the sound, her eyes softening. He's never had someone like you in his life. Julian followed her gaze. That makes two of us. She looked back at him, lips parted like she wanted to say something, but instead, she said, Come back tomorrow. He tilted his head. You sure? No. She smiled faintly. But that's never stopped me before. Julian returned the next day with a folder in his hand. Inside it, documents, case precedent, education law, notes from his legal team, already briefed on Elijah's situation. The kind of support Maya had never seen before, silent, but solid. She skimmed through it, stunned. You did all this overnight? Technically they did, Julian said. But I was on the phone until 1 a.m. Maya sat at the table, flipping through forms with practiced eyes. They always make it sound like a gift. Specialized facility. Extra care. But what they mean is exile. I know. They think I won't fight. Julian sat beside her. They think wrong. She looked at him, studied his face, the lines at the corners of his eyes that only showed when he was tired or telling the truth. You're not just helping, she said. You're getting involved. He nodded. That's dangerous. For who? Maya held his gaze. For both of us. There was something raw in her voice. Fear, maybe. Or memory. She'd trusted once before, and she'd been left holding the pieces. Julian leaned forward. Tell me something, Maya. What? If I had nothing. No foundation. No name. Just a coat and coffee in this exact same voice, would you have let me stay that day in the cafe? She didn't hesitate. Yes. He smiled. Then that's the only part of me that matters. She looked down at the folder, fingertips tracing the edge. This will shake things. Let it. You're not afraid? He shrugged. I've been afraid before. Didn't change anything. She chuckled. You're impossible. No, he said. I'm persistent. Elijah burst into the room then, dragging his backpack. Mama! Look, I found my Saturn project. He held up a wrinkled cardboard display covered in marker planets and silver glitter. Julian grinned. Is that Saturn's ring? Or a space tornado? Both, Elijah declared. Julian gave him a high five. Best answer. Maya watched the exchange, this effortless warmth, this easy rhythm between her son and a man she still barely knew and somehow trusted more than she wanted to admit. Elijah leaned against Julian's knee. Are you coming with us to my school meeting? Julian looked to Maya. She paused, then nodded. Yes, she said, he's coming. And just like that, the line between guest and partner began to blur. The school looked the same as always, beige walls, flickering fluorescent lights, and that faint smell of old books and industrial cleaning supplies. But to Maya, it never stopped feeling like a battlefield. Julian walked beside her down the long corridor, the soles of his shoes echoing softly against the linoleum. He carried a thin leather briefcase. Though he hadn't opened it since they left the car, it wasn't about what he brought, it was about who he was when he walked in. Maya clutched a manila folder of her own. Inside, Elijah's medical history, reports from therapists, drawings he'd made, a teacher's note saying, Elijah smiled today. Proof that he was more than a label, more than a diagnosis. Elijah wasn't with them today. She didn't want him anywhere near this room. Julian paused just before they reached the office door. You sure you want me in there? She looked up at him. If I go in alone, I'll be the angry black mother again. If I go in with you, I might finally be heard. He met her gaze. Then we go in together. Inside the meeting room, the table was already full. 3 school officials, a counselor, someone from the district who hadn't even bothered to take off his coat, and Mrs. Kessler, the administrator with the paper smile who had called Elijah a spirited child with disruptive tendencies last semester. They looked up as Maya and Julian entered. Julian offered no introduction, just pulled out a chair for Maya and took the seat beside her. Mrs. Kessler cleared her throat. Miss Williams, thank you for coming. Maya nodded once. We've reviewed Elijah's recent behavioral evaluations, said the district rep, tapping his tablet. Based on this data, we're proposing a transfer to a specialized academic environment better suited to isolating him? Maya interrupted. There was a pause. The man blinked. I wouldn't use that language. Of course not, Maya said, voice cool. Because you're not the mother being told her son is too much for your hallway. Julian sat silently, but the weight of his presence changed the air. Mrs. Kessler leaned forward. We want what's best for Elijah. This program has strong outcomes for students on the spectrum. Define strong, Maya said. Because last I checked, none of those programs prepare him for the real world. They prepare him for corridors with locks and staff who never learn his name. The counselor piped in, voice soft. We understand your concern, but Elijah does struggle with transitions, group work, and do you know what Elijah loves? Julian said, finally speaking. The entire room turned. He loves planets. He can name all 83 moons of Saturn in alphabetical order. He builds solar systems out of cereal boxes and uses glitter for comets. That's not a struggle. That's brilliance. The district man frowned. And you are? Julian opened his case, slid a document across the table. Julian Reed, advocate, guardian ad litem for Elijah Williams. Maya's heart skipped. The counselor read the form quickly. This is legally binding? Yes, Julian said, calm but firm. And I've also submitted a request for an independent educational evaluation outside of this district's control. Mrs. Kessler bristled. Mr. Reed, We followed all procedures. Your input, while noted, doesn't change the board's process. Julian didn't raise his voice. I'm not here to fight your process, he said. I'm here to tell you that if this recommendation proceeds, I'll file a civil rights complaint for discriminatory placement and systemic failure to accommodate Elijah under IDEA and Section 504. Silence. Maya almost smiled. Not because she enjoyed confrontation, but because, for once, someone else was swinging the sword with her. The district man cleared his throat. We may need to reconvene with legal counsel. Julian nodded. I'd suggest that. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. No decision made. No placement approved. For the first time in years, Maya walked out of that room without feeling defeated. In the parking lot, she turned to Julian. I didn't know you filed as his guardian. I asked Elijah, Julian said. He said, you help Mom. That means you help me too. Tears sprang to her eyes. You didn't have to do that, she said. Yes, he said, I did. They stood by her car, the late afternoon sun cutting across the blacktop. Maya reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a small, worn photo. It was Elijah, maybe 3, sitting in a cardboard rocket ship they'd built together. Glitter on his cheeks, that same spark in his eyes. She handed it to Julian. He took it carefully, reverently. I've never let anyone else hold this, she said. Julian looked at the photo, then at her. I'll protect him, Maya, however you let me. She didn't speak. She just nodded. And this time he understood what that meant. The days that followed were quiet, but not the brittle kind of quiet that comes after a fight. It was the kind of stillness that settles into a home after a storm has passed, windows intact, roof still standing, but everything inside slightly rearranged. The kind of quiet where people catch their breath, reassess the damage, and decide what pieces are worth keeping. Maya woke up Thursday morning to the smell of pancakes. She blinked, confused. The warmth of her comforter still wrapped around her. It was 6:30 a.m. Her alarm hadn't gone off yet. She slid out of bed, barefoot, careful not to wake Elijah, and padded toward the kitchen. What she found made her stop in the doorway. Julian stood at the stove, his sleeves rolled, flipping pancakes like it was something he'd always done. The sun crept in behind him, casting a golden outline on his back. You're up early, Maya said, arms crossed but amused. Julian turned, spatula in hand. I bribed your building manager for a spare key. She raised an eyebrow. I'm kidding, he added quickly. You gave me the spare last night. Remember? She had. In a moment of sleep-heavy decision-making, she'd handed him the key and mumbled something about early mornings and needing help with the bus run. She didn't expect him to take it seriously. I didn't expect a full breakfast, she said. Thought you could use a break, he replied, and Elijah said he prefers mine slightly burned. Maya snorted. Julian motioned to the table. Sit, I'll pour coffee. She hesitated still in her robe, hair messy, the vulnerability of domesticity clinging to her shoulders like a second skin. But then he brought her a steaming mug without asking how she liked it. Cream and a dash of cinnamon. She sipped. Surprised. You watched me make coffee, she said. I watch a lot of things, he replied, sliding a plate in front of her. Pancakes, scrambled eggs, turkey sausage, a sprig of parsley that looked hilariously out of place. Elijah rolled out of bed 10 minutes later and gave Julian a sleepy fist bump before collapsing into his chair. Maya watched them quietly, her son and this man who'd become a fixture in their life with such alarming speed. But it wasn't chaos. It wasn't invasion. It felt intentional, considered, like someone slowly adding brushstrokes to a painting she thought she had already finished. That afternoon, they visited the Children's Museum. Elijah loved the planetarium, of course. He sat cross-legged on the floor, neck craned up toward the domed ceiling, narrating each constellation before the guide could finish their sentence. Julian whispered to Maya as they watched from the back, "You ever think about letting him teach a class instead of taking one?" She smiled. He'd turned the syllabus into a solar system. Later, as Elijah experimented with a light and shadow exhibit, Julian stepped aside and leaned near her. "I got the email," he said.